Hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is an eternal law. Hello. Tonight, I want to talk about something that has probably kept you awake more nights than you would like to admit. The weight of other people's words, the sting of their judgment, that sharp comment someone made about you, maybe today, maybe years ago, that still sits in your chest like a stone you cannot seem to swallow or spit out. You know the feeling. Someone looks at you a certain way, talks about you behind your back, questions your choices, dismisses your effort, and suddenly your whole body tightens, your mind starts racing. You replay the moment over and over, rehearsing what you should have said, wondering what you did wrong, asking yourself why their opinion bothers you so much when you keep telling yourself it shouldn't. Tonight's conversation is called How to Stay Calm When Others Judge You, the Buddha's Guide to Equanimity. And it begins with a single truth that the Buddha himself demonstrated more powerfully than anyone who has ever lived. Over 2,500 years ago, in a grove near the city of Savatthi, the Buddha was sitting among his disciples, teaching quietly as the late afternoon sun fell through the trees. The gathering was calm, unhurried. People had walked from distant villages just to hear him speak. But not everyone came to listen. A Brahmin named Akosaka Bharadvaja came to attack. Several of Akosaka's relatives had recently left the Brahmin tradition to follow the Buddha's teachings, and this enraged him. He saw the Buddha not as a teacher, but as a thief, someone stealing his family, his honor, his heritage. So Akosaka marched into the grove that day, fueled by a very personal fury. He stood at the edge of the assembly, and without any greeting or pause, he began shouting. He called the Buddha a fraud, a deceiver, a man without caste or worth. He threw every insult he could find, crude, sharp, personal. He wanted to provoke. He wanted a reaction. He wanted the Buddha to lose his composure in front of everyone so that the whole world could see this so-called enlightened teacher was just a man, just as petty and vulnerable as anyone else. The disciples shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at the ground. Others clenched their jaws, fighting the urge to respond. But the Buddha did nothing. He sat perfectly still. His face did not harden. His posture did not change. He simply looked at Akosaka the way a parent might look at a child throwing a tantrum, not with condescension, but with genuine, unhurried patience. When Akosaka finally ran out of words and stood there panting, the Buddha spoke. His voice was even, without a trace of anger, without a hint of defensiveness. He asked a question. "Tell me, Brahmin, do you sometimes invite guests to your home for a meal?" Akosaka, caught by the change in direction, answered bluntly, "Yes, of course I do." The Buddha continued, "And when you set the table and offer food, if a guest refuses to eat, if they push the plate away and say, 'No, thank you,' whose food is it then? Who does it belong to?" Akosaka frowned, confused but unable to deny the obvious. "It would remain mine. If no one takes it, I keep it." The Buddha nodded. "In exactly the same way, Brahmin, you came here today with a feast of anger. You prepared insults. You served them with great energy. But I have not accepted a single one. I did not take your words. I did not eat from your plate. So tell me, who is left holding all of that anger?" The grove went silent. Even the birds seemed to pause. Akosaka stood there, mouth half open, suddenly aware of something he had never considered. The anger he had carried all the way from his village, the fury that had burned in his belly for days, none of it had touched the Buddha. It was still sitting right where it started, inside himself. This is worth sitting with for a moment, because it changes the entire way you think about insults, criticism, and judgment. We have been taught by culture, by habit, by instinct, that when someone says something hurtful to us, we must respond. We must defend ourselves, argue back, or at the very least feel wounded. It feels automatic, as though words are objects with physical force, and once thrown, they cannot be dodged. But the Buddha revealed something different. Words are not arrows, they are offerings, and every offering requires two parties, someone to give and someone to receive. If there is no receiver, the offering has no destination. It stays with the giver. Think about the last time someone said something that hurt you. A coworker who dismissed your idea, a family member who questioned your life decisions, a stranger online who left a cruel comment. In the moment, it felt like their words entered you, like a blade passing through skin. But did they? Or was it your own reaction that did the cutting? Were the words themselves, or the meaning you assigned to them, the weight you chose to give them, the space you cleared inside your chest to store them? Akosaka's insults did not land because the Buddha built no platform for them to land on. There was no pride to wound, no self-image to defend, no ego standing at the gate waiting to be offended. The words arrived and found nothing to attach to, so they fell at Akosaka's own feet. This is not about pretending insults do not hurt. It is not about wearing a mask of indifference. It is about a fundamental shift in understanding, recognizing that the act of receiving an insult is a choice, not an inevitability. You have always had the power to leave the plate untouched. You simply were never told it was an option. So tonight, if there are words still ringing in your ears, things people said to you that you have been holding and turning over like stones in your pocket, ask yourself one honest question. Did they give this to me, or did I take it? Because if you took it, you can also set it down. And if it was never truly yours to begin with, then you have been carrying someone else's baggage all this time. That alone is enough to make the load a little lighter. But the question remains, what happens when the judgment is not just words? What happens when the cruelty goes deeper than insults? When the world does not just speak against you, but acts against you? There is a story recorded in the Jataka tales, the ancient collection of the Buddha's past lives, that answers that question with a force that has echoed across 25 centuries. It is the story of a being known as Kantivadi. The name itself means the teacher of patience, and what happened to him is one of the most extreme tests of equanimity ever recorded in any spiritual tradition. In a lifetime long before his final birth as Siddhartha Gautama, the Bodhisattva, the being who would one day become the Buddha, was born as a sage. He had spent years in deep practice, renouncing wealth and comfort, living in the forest, and dedicating his entire life to the perfection of khanti, patience. Not patience in the small, ordinary sense, not waiting in line or tolerating a rude neighbor, but patience as a spiritual force. the kind of patience that holds steady when everything around it is breaking apart. He became so accomplished in this practice that people began calling him Kantivadi, and students traveled great distances to learn from him. One of the places where he would teach was a royal park, a grove of mango and sal trees on the outskirts of a kingdom ruled by King Kalabu. The king was known for his temper, his pride, and his cruelty. He ruled not through wisdom, but through fear, and his court lived in constant anxiety, never knowing when his mood would turn. One afternoon, a group of the king's royal courtesans, his dancers and attendants, wandered into the grove while the king slept off an afternoon of wine. They found Kantivadi sitting beneath a tree teaching. His presence had a quality that drew people in. He spoke about patience, about how anger is a fire that burns the one who holds it, about how gentleness is not weakness, but the highest form of strength. The courtesans sat down, captivated. Some of them had tears in their eyes. For the first time in their lives, someone was speaking to them not as objects of entertainment, but as human beings capable of understanding deep truths. When King Kalabu awoke and found his courtesans missing, he flew into a rage. His attendants pointed him toward the grove. The king stormed through the trees and found his women seated at the feet of this ragged forest ascetic, hanging on every word. His jealousy and his pride merged into something vicious. He did not see a teacher, he saw a threat, a man stealing the attention and admiration that belonged to him. Before Kantivadi and sneered. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What do you teach?" Kantivadi looked up at the king without fear, without aggression, without even a flinch. "I teach patience, O king." Kalagu smiled, the kind of smile that carries no warmth. "Patience, how convenient. Let us see how deep your patience really goes." He turned to his executioner. "Cut off his hands." The executioner hesitated. The courtesans gasped. But King Kalagu was not a man who tolerated hesitation. He gave the order again, louder, and the executioner obeyed. Try to understand what is happening in this moment. This is not a philosophical debate. This is not a hypothetical classroom exercise. A man who has spent his entire life practicing patience is now having his hands severed from his body on the whim of a jealous king. The pain is real. The blood is real. The violence is happening in daylight, in front of witnesses, and no one can stop it. And Kantivadi did not cry out. He did not curse the king. He did not beg. His face tightened from the pain. He was a human being, not a stone, but his heart did not harden. He remained seated. He remained present. The king looked down at the monk's bleeding arms and asked again, with mockery dripping from every syllable, "What do you teach now, ascetic?" Kantivadi answered, his voice steady despite the pain. "I teach patience, O king. My patience does not reside in my hands." Kalabu's face darkened. A man who cannot be broken by pain is a man who cannot be controlled. And for a tyrant, there is nothing more threatening than someone he cannot control. So he escalated. "Cut off his feet." The executioner obeyed. And again, Kantivadi did not retaliate, did not beg, did not waver. The king asked the same question, and the answer came back the same. "I teach patience. My patience does not reside in my feet." This continued. The ears were cut. The nose was cut. With each mutilation, the king demanded to know what the monk taught.
With each answer, Kantivadi pointed inward to a place the king's sword could never reach. His patience was not in his extremities, it was not in his flesh. It lived in the core of his being, in a chamber so deep that no act of violence could reach it. Now, why does this story matter to you? You are not being physically harmed by the people who judge you. No one is holding a sword to your body. And yet, be honest with yourself. Sometimes a single cruel word can feel as if it cuts just as deep. A parent's disappointment, a partner's contempt, a boss who tears apart your work in front of everyone, a friend who betrays your trust and then acts as though you are the problem. These things leave marks, not on the skin, but somewhere beneath it, in a place you cannot quite point to, but can always feel. The lesson of Kantivadi is not that you should be numb to pain. He felt every cut. The texts are clear about that. He was in agony. The lesson is that pain and the corruption of
Heart are two entirely separate events. One is something that happens to you. The other is something you allow to happen within you. The king could destroy Kantivadi's body. He could take every limb. But Kantivadi's heart, his willingness to remain patient, to refuse hatred, to hold no grudge, that was a door that could only be opened from the inside, and Kantivadi chose to keep it shut. This is the distinction most people miss when they talk about patience. They think patience means tolerating mistreatment. They think it means being passive, being walked over, being the person who never speaks up. But that is not what Kantivadi demonstrated. He was not passive. He was profoundly active, actively choosing in every single moment of escalating violence not to let hatred enter his heart. That is not weakness. That is the most demanding form of inner strength that exists. Think about your own life. When someone criticizes you unfairly, what happens inside? First comes the sting, that initial flash of pain. That is the first arrow, and you cannot always prevent it. But then something else begins. The sting becomes a story. Your mind starts building a case. They were unfair. They had no right. They do not understand me. I should have said this. I should have done that. The story grows. It branches out. It touches old wounds. Hours later, you are no longer reacting to what they said. You are reacting to a narrative you constructed around what they said, and that narrative has grown far larger and more painful than the original event. Kantivadi's practice was to cut that chain at the very first link. Pain arrived, and he let it be pain. He did not wrap it in story. He did not connect it to a narrative of injustice. He did not use it as evidence that the world was cruel or that he was a victim. He experienced the raw sensation and refused to add anything to it. The ancient commentaries describe something remarkable about the moment of Kantivadi's death. As his life was fading, his disciples asked him, begged him, did he feel any anger at all toward the king Kalabu? And Kantivadi made a vow, a truthful declaration known as a Sakakirya. He said, if it is true that I have not harbored even a single moment of ill will toward the king, may these words serve as witness. In the Theravada tradition, this kind of declaration carries immense weight. It is not made lightly. It is a statement of absolute, unshakable inner truth. He died without hatred. A man whose body had been systematically destroyed
died with a heart cleaner than the man who destroyed him. And King Kalabu? The texts say that the earth itself could not bear the weight of his cruelty. The ground beneath his feet gave way, and he was swallowed into the earth. This is not merely a dramatic flourish. In the Buddhist understanding, it points to a fundamental law. Cruelty ultimately destroys the one who wields it. The king spent his entire life wielding power over others, and
In the end, the only person he truly destroyed was himself. There is a pattern here worth noticing. In the previous story, Akosaka threw insults and they returned to him. In this story, Kalabu inflicted violence and it consumed him. The principle is the same. What you send out determines what you receive. Not as some mystical cosmic karma machine, but as a straightforward cause and effect relationship within the mind. A person who spends their life in anger lives in anger. A person who spends their life in patience lives in patience. You do not escape the climate of your own heart. So when someone judges you harshly, when they say you are not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy of love or respect, recognize what is actually happening. They are wielding a sword. It may not be made of metal, but it is aimed at you just the same. And you have a choice in that moment. You can let the blade reach your heart, where it will fester and breed resentment for years. Or you can do what Kantivadi did, acknowledge the pain of the cut while keeping the inner door firmly closed. Your patience does not live in whether they approve of you. It does not live in whether they apologize. It does not live in whether the world recognizes that you were treated unfairly. Your patience lives in a place their words cannot reach, unless you escort those words there yourself. But here is where an honest question arises, one that you might be turning over in your mind right now. If the problem is not the judgment itself, but how we receive it, then why do certain words cut deeper than others? Why is it that a stranger's comment rolls off your back, but the same words from someone you love can ruin your entire week? The answer has less to do with the words and more to do with the lens through which they are seen. And there is a story, an old Zen tale, that makes this clearer than any explanation ever could. There was once a Zen master who also happened to be a painter. He was not famous for his painting the way he was famous for his teaching, but those who had seen his work knew that he possessed a rare gift. His brushstrokes were alive, his landscapes breathed, his ink seemed to carry the same stillness that his meditation carried, and people said you could feel peace simply by looking at one of his scrolls. One autumn, after months of work, the master completed what he believed to be his finest piece, a panoramic mountains rising through layers of morning mist, with a single crane standing at the edge of a half-frozen lake. The proportions were perfect, the balance of empty space and detail, of ink and absence, was something he had never achieved before. For the first time in his long career, he felt something close to pride. He wanted to share it with the world. So he carried the scroll to the center of the village, unrolled it across a wide stone wall in the marketplace, and placed a small pot of red ink and a brush beside it. Brush, he placed a sign that read, "If you see any flaw in this painting, please mark it with a red circle." Then he stepped back and waited. By mid-morning, a few people had stopped to look. Some nodded approvingly, but then a farmer walked up, squinted at the crane's left leg, shook his head, and dabbed a red circle on it.
"The angle is wrong," he muttered, and walked away. A short while later, a merchant stopped and circled the placement of a tree in the foreground. "Too close to the lake," she said. A child circled a cloud. A monk circled the spacing of the mountain ridges. A carpenter circled the frame of an imaginary house he thought should exist in the lower corner. By the time the sun set, the master returned to find his painting covered, absolutely covered in red circles. There was barely an inch of the scroll that someone had not found fault with. The crane's leg, the angle of the mountains, the emptiness of the sky, the shade of the mist, things that contradicted each other. One person circled an area for being too crowded, while another circled the same area for being too sparse. The painting, his finest work, looked as though it had been attacked. Red marks everywhere, like wounds. The master was devastated. He rolled up the scroll and carried it home in silence. That evening, his student, a young monk who had been with him for several years, found him sitting alone, staring at the ruined painting. The student asked what had happened. The master told him, and the student listened without interrupting. When the story was finished, the student said nothing, but asked if he could borrow the painting overnight. The next morning, the student returned to the marketplace. He carried a second scroll, an exact copy of the original painting that the master had painted some weeks before as practice. Same mountains, same mist, same crane, same lake, same composition. He hung it in the same spot, placed the same red ink and brush beside it, but changed the sign. This time it read, "If you see something beautiful in this painting, please mark it with a red circle." The master, uncertain and still bruised from the day before, watched from across the square. The same villagers walked past, the same farmer, the same merchant, the same monk, the same carpenter. One by one they stopped, looked, and began to circle. By sunset, the painting was once again covered in red, but this time every circle marked something the viewer found beautiful. The delicate arch of the crane's neck, the way the mountains dissolved into mist, the emptiness of the sky that gave the whole image room to breathe, the precise spacing of the trees. The same elements that had been called flaws the day before were now being celebrated as masterstrokes. The master stood across the square, staring at the two results. Same painting, same village, same people, completely opposite conclusions. The only thing that changed was the question.
Bring it into your own life. Think about the people who have judged you. Think about the specific criticisms they have made. You are too sensitive. You are too cold. You try too hard. You do not try hard enough. You talk too much. You are too quiet. You are too ambitious. You have no ambition. Have you noticed how often the judgments contradict each other? One person finds you too emotional, while another finds you detached. One person thinks you are overbearing, while another thinks you are invisible. This is not because you are a contradiction. It is because each person who looks at you is carrying their own sign, their own question, and the question they carry determines what they find. A person who walks through the world looking for flaws will find flaws everywhere, in you, in themselves, in the weather, in the food, in everything. It is not that the world is flawed. It is that their lens only picks up imperfections. They cannot help it. It is the only question they know how to ask.
And a person who walks through the world looking for beauty will find beauty in the same places, same painting, same person, same you, different question. When your boss tells you that your work is not good enough, consider the possibility that they are not evaluating your work. They are answering a question that their own dissatisfaction wrote for them long before you ever submitted that report. When your parents express disappointment in your choices, consider that the question they carry, the one they have carried since their own parents judged them, filters everything they see into categories of adequate and inadequate. It is their question. It was always their question. This does not mean that feedback is meaningless. Sometimes people point out something genuinely important, and a wise person listens. But there is a vast difference between constructive observation and reflexive judgment. Constructive observation comes from someone who looked at your painting with the sign that says, "Where can this be even better?" Reflexive judgment comes from someone whose sign has always read, "Where is this failing?" and the answer was decided before they even looked. The master's painting did not change between the 2 days. Not a single brushstroke was added or removed. The crane was the same crane. The mountain was the same mountain. The mist was the same mist. What changed was entirely external, the frame through which people were asked to look. You are that painting. You have always been that painting. And the people in your life, the ones who praise you and the ones who criticize you, are all standing in front of the same canvas. What they see has far more to do with the sign they are carrying than with anything you have actually done. This is not an excuse to dismiss all criticism, but it is permission to stop treating every negative opinion as proof of your failure. The farmer who circled the crane's leg was not an art critic. He was a farmer. He knew.
Legs, the legs of cows and horses and chickens, and the crane's leg did not match what he was used to. His red circle was not evidence that the painting was wrong. It was evidence of the limits of his experience. Consider how much energy you spend trying to remove the red circles from your life. How many times have you changed the way you speak, the way you dress, the way you present yourself, just to avoid someone's disapproval? And how many times, after making those changes, did you discover that a new set of circles appeared, because you cannot paint yourself into a version that satisfies every sign in the marketplace? The master learned something that evening that no amount of painting skill could have taught him. He learned that the opinions of others are reflections of their own inner world projected outward. They are not measurements of truth. They are measurements of the measurer. You are not responsible for the signs other people carry. You are not responsible for the questions their suffering has taught them to ask. You are only responsible for continuing to paint, honestly, carefully, with as much truth as you are capable of, and letting the circles fall where they may. Some people will see your flaws. Some people will see your beauty. Both are looking at the same you. Neither is seeing the whole picture. The whole picture is something only you can see, and only when you stop trying to see yourself through their eyes. And once you stop trying to control what others see when they look at you, something unexpected begins to happen. The constant, exhausting vigilance of managing your image, that internal surveillance system that runs every time you walk into a room, scanning faces for disapproval, starts to quiet down. Not because you have become careless, but because you have realized that the surveillance was never protecting you.
It was only making you tired. Let the circles be. They were never about you. But even with that understanding, even when you recognize that people's judgments reflect their own inner landscape, there is still one judge whose opinion cuts deeper than all the rest, one critic you cannot escape, no matter how many Zen stories you learn, no matter how clearly you understand the mechanics of projection. That critic is you. And the most painful arrow in the entire quiver is the one you aim at your own heart. The Buddha spoke about this directly. In a teaching recorded in the Salata Sutta, he used a very precise image. He said, when an untrained person is struck by a painful feeling, it is as if they were pierced by an arrow. Then, reacting to that painful feeling with aversion, grief, or lamentation, they are struck by a second arrow. 2 arrows. The first one comes from outside, the cruel remark, the unfair judgment, the look of contempt. You did not ask for it. You did not invite it. It arrived on its own, and it hurt. That first arrow is part of being alive. Even the Buddha was struck by
First arrows. Even enlightened beings experience unpleasant contact with the world. There is no teaching in any tradition, Buddhist or otherwise, that promises you a life free from the first arrow. It will come, sometimes from strangers, sometimes from the people closest to you. It lands and it stings. But the second arrow, that is the one that does real damage. And the second arrow is always self-inflicted. The second arrow is what happens after the sting. It is the story you build around the pain. It is the hours you spend replaying what they said. It is the voice in your head that takes their criticism and amplifies it into an indictment of your entire worth as a human being. Someone says, "That was a careless mistake," and the second arrow turns it into, "I am a careless person. I have always been careless. Everyone knows it. I will never be taken seriously. Why do I even try?" The first arrow drew a drop of blood. The second arrow opened a wound that may take years to close. Consider a specific situation. Imagine you are at work. You have spent a week preparing a presentation. You are proud of it. You have stayed late, sacrificed sleep, poured genuine effort into making it as good as you could. You stand up in front of the room looking for one thing, acknowledgement that your work mattered. The presentation ends. Most people nod. A few compliment you afterward. But one person, maybe your supervisor, maybe a colleague whose opinion you respect, says flatly, "I expected more from you." 4 words. The entire interaction lasts no more than 10 seconds, and then they move on. They check their phone, grab a coffee, start talking about something else entirely. For them, the comment is already forgotten, a passing thought, spoken without weight, discarded like a receipt they did not need. But for you, those 4 words have entered your bloodstream. You sit back down at your desk, and the replay begins. I expected more from you. What did they mean? Was the whole thing bad? Did everyone else think so too and just not say it? Are they going to mention this to the director? Is this going to affect your evaluation? Should you redo the entire thing? Should you email them and ask what specifically was wrong? No, that would seem desperate. But doing nothing feels unbearable. An hour passes. You have not done any work. You have been staring at the same email without reading it, because every 30 seconds those 4 words loop back. I expected more from you.
And now the second arrow is digging deeper because the voice has shifted from replaying their words to composing your own. Maybe they are right. Maybe I am not good enough. Maybe I have been fooling everyone this whole time, and this is the moment it all unravels. By evening, you are lying in bed, maybe this bed, maybe tonight, and you have turned a 10-second comment into a full-length trial. You are both the defendant and the prosecutor. There is no defense attorney.
The verdict was decided before the trial began. This is the second arrow, and the reason it causes so much more damage than the first is that it never stops. The person who made the comment said it once. You have said it to yourself 400 times. They spent 10 seconds on it. You have spent 10 hours. They aimed a pebble. You built a boulder. The Buddha's teaching here is not about pretending the first arrow did not hurt. He never said, "Do not feel pain." He said very clearly that painful feelings arise for everyone. What he identified, with a precision that remains astonishing, is the mechanism by which ordinary pain becomes extraordinary suffering. The mechanism is addition. We take the raw, simple sting and add to it. We add interpretation. We add personal history. We add projection. We add catastrophe. Each addition is another arrow, and we fire every single one ourselves. Imagine for a moment that you could respond to the critical comment without adding anything to it. I expected more from you. You hear it. It stings. You acknowledge the sting. And then nothing. You do not explain it. You do not expand it. You do not historicize it. You do not carry it to bed. The comment exists in the 10 seconds it occupied, and you let it stay there. What would that feel like? It would feel strange at first because your mind is habituated to the second arrow. It expects the cascade. The moment pain arrives, your mind has an automatic protocol. Receive the pain, then build the case. Receive the wound, then scratch it open. It has been doing this for so long that the second arrow feels like part of the first, as though the rumination is an inevitable consequence of being hurt. But it is not. The Buddha made this distinction, first arrow, second arrow, specifically to show that they are separate events. One is done to you, the other is done by you, and anything done by you can, with practice, be undone by you. This does not happen overnight. Let that be clear. You will not hear this teaching once and suddenly stop replaying painful comments in your head. The grooves of that habit run deep. But what changes immediately, tonight if you let it, is the awareness. From now on, when you catch yourself looping on something someone said, you will recognize the second arrow for what it is. You will see yourself reaching for the bow. And in that moment of recognition, you have a choice you did not have before. You can put the bow down. Not because the comment did not matter, not because your feelings are invalid, not because you are supposed to be above it all, but because you have suffered enough. The first arrow already landed. You already felt the sting. Everything that comes after, the replaying, the ruminating, the self-condemning, is additional, optional, and entirely in your hands. There is an important distinction here that the Buddhist teaching makes very carefully. Not reacting to the second arrow does not mean suppressing your feelings. Suppression and letting go are not the same thing. Suppression is when you feel the pain, recognize it, and then push it down, telling yourself you should not feel it, shaming yourself for being affected, adding yet another layer. Why am I so weak? Why can't I just let this go? That is a third arrow, and a fourth. Suppression is violence directed inward, wearing the mask of discipline. Letting go is entirely different. Letting go means you feel the pain fully. You sit with it. You give it the respect of your full attention. You say, yes, this hurts. This is unpleasant. And then, without adding a story, without building a case, without turning the pain into a permanent feature of your identity, you allow it to pass through you. Pain, when it is not fed, has a natural lifespan. It arises, it peaks, it fades. Every painful feeling you have ever had, every single one, eventually passed, not because you solved it or argued it away, but because feelings, by their nature, are impermanent. They move, they shift, they dissolve. The problem arises when we give them a reason to stay. The second arrow is not just additional pain, it is an anchor. It fixes the original pain in place. By replaying the comment, by rehashing the story, by turning the sting into a narrative, you are giving the pain a permanent address inside you. You are building it a house and inviting it to move in, and then you wonder why it will not leave. Tonight, try something different. If there is a comment lodged in your mind, something someone said that you have been turning over for days or weeks or years, do not try to resolve it. Do not try to figure out why they said it or what it means about you. Just notice that you are holding it. Notice that your hands are around the second arrow and you have been pulling it deeper without realizing it. Then open your hands. You do not have to throw the arrow away. You do not have to pretend it doesn't exist. Just open your fingers, gently, the way you would release a small bird you have been holding too tightly. If the thought comes back, and it might, notice it again and open your hands again, as many times as it takes. The practice is not about succeeding once. It is about choosing each time the arrow appears not to drive it deeper. The person who criticized you used 10 seconds of their life. Do not hand them the rest of yours. And yet, even with all of this, even when you learn not to accept the insult, even when you keep the inner door closed, even when you see that people's judgments reflect their own lens, even when you stop shooting the second arrow, there remains a particular kind of suffering that none of these teachings quite addresses. It is the suffering of being misjudged over a long period of time, not a single comment, not a passing remark, but a sustained, relentless judgment from the people around you that threatens to rewrite how you see yourself entirely. The kind of judgment that does not just sting, it erases. It makes you doubt your own story. And for that, there is a different kind of teaching altogether. In the time of the Buddha, in the kingdom of Kolya, there lived a queen named Supavasa. She was married to a prince of the Kolya clan, and she was devout in her practice. She offered alms to monks. She observed the precepts. She lived with generosity and sincerity. And when she became pregnant, she and her husband were overjoyed. A child was coming, a new life, a continuation of their lineage, a blessing. But the pregnancy did not go as expected. Months passed and the child did not come. The usual time came and went. A year passed, then 2 years, then 3. The baby remained in the womb, and with each passing month, Supavasa's body was racked with pain. The discomfort was constant and severe. It was not the normal discomfort of pregnancy. It was something far beyond that, an agony that no medicine or remedy could reduce.
And while Supavasa suffered in her body, the world around her began to suffer in a different way, in its opinions. The whispers started early. Neighbors spoke quietly at first, then louder. Something was wrong with this child. A normal pregnancy does not last this long. The baby must be cursed. It must be a punishment for something the queen did in a past life. Perhaps she was harboring some hidden sin. Perhaps the child was not a blessing, but an omen. Family members began to distance themselves. Friends who had visited regularly stopped coming. Some said openly that Supavasa should abandon the pregnancy, do whatever was necessary to end the suffering, because clearly this child was not meant to be born, not meant to live, not meant to be part of this world. 7 years. That is how long the pregnancy lasted. 7 years of physical pain and 7 years of something arguably worse, the unrelenting judgment of everyone around her. She was pitied, she was feared, she was whispered about in every household in the kingdom. The queen who carried a cursed child, the woman whose womb became a prison. Imagine being judged not for something you did, but for something that was happening to you, something you did not choose. Supavasa did not ask for this suffering. She did not create it. She simply endured it, day after day, year after year, while the world decided what it meant before the story was even finished. And this is the cruelest form of judgment, is it not? When people look at your pain and decide it is evidence of your failure, when they see your struggle and conclude that you must deserve it somehow, when they watch you going through something they do not understand, and rather than sitting with that uncertainty, they fill it with an explanation that makes them comfortable, and that explanation almost always puts the blame on you. During those 7 years, Supavasa sent a message to the Buddha. She did not ask for the pain to end. She did not beg for a miracle. She simply asked for his blessing, for whatever comfort his words might bring. And the Buddha, upon hearing of her suffering, sent back a message that became one of the most quietly powerful statements in the Pali Canon. He said, "May Supavasa be well and healthy. May she give birth to a healthy son." And then he added something that no one else in the kingdom had the vision to say. "The child in her womb is no ordinary being. He will become one of the foremost among my disciples." Let those words land. Everyone in the kingdom, relatives, neighbors, village elders, had looked at Supavasa's situation and concluded that the child was cursed, that something was deeply wrong, that the length of the suffering was proof that this was a tragedy, a punishment, a mistake. They looked at the pain and saw only the pain. They could not see past it. The Buddha looked at the same situation and saw what was growing inside it. He did not deny the pain. He did not minimize the suffering, but he refused to let the suffering define the outcome. The delay was not a curse. The delay was the slow ripening of something extraordinary. And he was right. When Sivali was finally born, the birth was easy and joyful. Supavasa's suffering ended immediately. The child grew into a monk of immense spiritual attainment, and the Buddha himself declared Sivali to be the foremost among his disciples in receiving offerings. This was not a trivial distinction. It meant that wherever Sivali traveled, even into the most remote and barren regions, food, shelter, and generosity appeared as if from nowhere. His presence brought abundance. Communities that had struggled for years would experience an inexplicable surge of prosperity when Sivali passed through. Caravan routes that had been plagued by famine would suddenly find water and provisions. The very person that the world had tried to condemn before he was even born became one of the greatest blessings ever to walk the earth. Now, bring this into your own life. Not the miraculous parts. You do not need to be declared a saint for this teaching to matter. Bring in the part about the judgment. Have you ever been in a situation where people looked at your suffering and decided you must be doing something wrong? Where they saw you struggling and instead of offering support, they offered theories about why you deserved it? Maybe you went through a difficult divorce and people whispered that you must have been a bad partner. Maybe you lost a job and relatives assumed you must have been lazy or incompetent. Maybe you are dealing with a health issue that no one can see, and people have started to hint, gently at first, then less gently, that maybe the problem is in your head, that maybe you are exaggerating, that maybe you just need to try harder. This is the weight Supavasa carried for 7 years, not just the physical pain, but the psychological isolation of having her suffering reinterpreted by people who did not know what was growing inside her. The world judges what it can see, and what it can see is always incomplete. People see your struggle. They do not see the growth happening beneath it. They see your delay. They do not see the preparation taking place. They see you falling behind their timeline, behind their expectations, behind the image they have of where you should be by now, and they mark you with circles, the same way the villagers circled the painting. Something is wrong here. This is taking too long. They should have figured it out by now. But you are not on their timeline. You never were. Sivali spent 7 years in a space that everyone else wanted to rush. Everyone wanted the birth to happen sooner. Everyone had an opinion about when it should have occurred, what was natural, what was normal, what was acceptable. But the timing was not theirs to determine. The timing belonged to a process much deeper, much wiser, and much more patient than any of them could understand. Your timing is yours. The things in your life that feel delayed, the success that has not arrived, the healing that has not completed, the understanding that has not crystallized, are not evidence that you are failing. They may be evidence that what is growing inside you requires more time, more space, more patience than the people around you are willing to give. That does not make them bad people. Most of the villagers in Supavasa's kingdom were not cruel. They were simply limited. They could only work with what they could see, and what they could see was a pregnancy that lasted far too long. Their judgment was not malicious, it was narrow. They lacked the ability to see what the Buddha saw, because they were looking through the lens of their own experience, and their experience told them that anything this delayed must be wrong. Remember the painting. The sign determines what people find. The villagers in Kolia were carrying a sign that read, "What is wrong with this woman's pregnancy?" And of course they found answers, because when you go looking for what is wrong, you will always find something. But the Buddha was carrying a different sign entirely. What is this suffering preparing? And the answer was Sivali. Other people's timelines are not your truth. Their expectations are not your destiny. Their impatience with your journey is a reflection of their own discomfort with uncertainty, not a measurement of your progress. You are still growing. You are still becoming. And the fact that no one around you can see what you are becoming does not mean it is not happening. Supavasa could not see Sivali through the walls of her own pain. She did not know, through those 7 years of agony, that the child inside her would one day bring abundance to thousands. She bore the pain and the judgment without any guarantee that it would mean something. That is faith in its purest form, not faith in a specific outcome, but faith that the suffering
is not random, that the delay is not punishment, that the process, however agonizing, is producing something real. If you are in a season like that right now, a season where nothing seems to be moving, where people have started to question your path, where even you have started to wonder if they might be right, let Sivali's story sit with you tonight. Not as a promise that everything will work out exactly as you hope, because life does not come with those guarantees, but as a reminder that what looks like stagnation from the outside may be development from the inside. That the fruit that takes longest to ripen is often the one that feeds the most people. And that the judgment of those who cannot see inside you has no authority over what is actually there. 7 years of whispers could not prevent Sivali from becoming who he was meant to be. And the words of the people around you, however loud, however persistent, however convinced they are that they know your story better than you do, cannot prevent you from becoming who you are meant to be either. But even this, even the knowledge that judgment says more about the judge than the judged, even the understanding that your timing is not the world's to control, even this does not fully answer the hardest question of all. Because there are times when the judgment is not just whispered behind your back. There are times when it is screamed in your face. Times when your reputation is destroyed publicly, when everything you have built is torn apart by accusation, when the world turns against you based on a lie. What then? When the storm is not just a drizzle of disapproval, but a full-scale destruction of your name, how do you stay calm then? There was a Zen master in Japan named Hakuin. He lived in a small temple on the edge of a quiet village, and over the years he had earned the deep respect of the community. People came to him for guidance. They trusted him with their troubles, their doubts, their grief. He was not a grand or flashy teacher. He was simply steady, honest, and present. The kind of person whose character was built not on proclamation, but on decades of consistent conduct. One day, a young woman in the village became pregnant. She was unmarried, and in the strict moral climate of that era, this was a devastating scandal for her family. Her parents were furious. They demanded to know who the father was. The young woman, terrified and desperate to protect the real father, a young fisherman she loved, but whose family was too poor to withstand the fallout, panicked. Under relentless pressure, she needed a name that would satisfy her parents' rage. She chose Hakuin. The accusation spread through the village faster than fire through dry grass. Within hours, everyone knew. The monk, Hakuin, the man they had trusted, had fathered a child with a young woman. The reaction was immediate and total. Former students refused to return to his temple. Neighbors who had bowed to him for years now looked away in disgust. One by one, supporters drifted away, and soon the village had turned completely.
Years turned away in the street. Parents who had sent their children to learn from him came to collect them, disgusted. People left rotting food at his gate. They spat at his door. His reputation, built over a lifetime, was dismantled in a single afternoon. When the young woman's parents arrived at his temple carrying the newborn baby, thrust it toward him with a mixture of fury and disgust, demanding that he take responsibility, Hakuin looked at the child, then at the parents, and all he said was, "Is that so?" 3 words. No defense, no denial, no outrage, no explanation. He took the baby in his arms, turned around, and began caring for it. Think about what that moment required. Here is a man who has been falsely accused of something that contradicts everything he has spent his life embodying. His entire community has turned against him. The whispers are not just whispers, they are howls. People who once sought his wisdom now regard him as the worst kind of hypocrite. His name, which took decades to build, has been reduced to an insult. And his response is 3 words that contain no resistance. Now, most people would fight, and you could argue that fighting would be justified. He was innocent. The accusation was a lie. He had every right to defend himself, to demand the truth be told, to clear his name publicly. Any court would have sided with him. Any reasonable person presented with the full facts would have understood. But Hakuin did not fight. And this is the part of the story that divides people. Some hear it and feel frustrated. Why didn't he speak up? Why did he let them believe a lie? Isn't silence the same as accepting the accusation? Others hear it and feel something else entirely, a recognition of a freedom so radical that it is almost frightening. The freedom of a person who simply does not need the world to know who they are. Hakuin knew who he was. He knew what he had done and what he had not done. That knowledge was complete. It did not require external validation. It did not require a trial, a verdict, a public retraction, or an apology. The truth lived inside him, fully intact, regardless of what anyone else believed. And so the accusation, devastating as it was to his social standing, simply had no interior destination. It could destroy his reputation. It could not destroy his identity. There is a difference between those 2 things that most of us have never been forced to confront. Your reputation is what the world thinks of you. Your identity is what you know yourself to be. Most of the time, these 2 things overlap enough that we never have to choose between them. But when they diverge, when the world decides you are something you know you are not, you discover which one you have been living from all along. If your peace depends on your reputation, then a single accusation can shatter you, because you have outsourced your sense of self to a group of people who can change their minds overnight. Are only as stable as their latest opinion, and opinions, as we have seen, are shaped by whatever sign the viewer is carrying. If your peace depends on your identity, on the quiet, unshakable knowing of who you are and what you stand for, then the accusation lands on the surface and goes no further. It damages the exterior. It leaves the interior untouched. Hakuin lived from his identity. That is why 3 words were sufficient. Months passed. Hakuin raised the child with tenderness. He begged for milk from the village women, the same women who despised him, so the baby could eat. He bore the humiliation without complaint. He did not once in all those months attempt to correct the record. He simply lived. He cared for the child. He continued his practice. He let the world think what it wanted. And then, as these things tend to do, the truth surfaced on its own timetable. The young woman, consumed by guilt that had grown heavier with every passing month, could no longer bear the weight of her lie. She confessed to her parents. The real father was the young fisherman. Hakuin had nothing to do with it. Her parents were horrified. They realized what they had done, not just to Hakuin's reputation, but to a man who had accepted their cruelty with absolute grace. They rushed to the temple, fell at his feet, and begged for forgiveness. They apologized profusely, explained the misunderstanding, offered to publicly restore his name. They brought the community with them, the same neighbors, the same former students, all now burning with shame and regret. Hakuin listened to all of it. He handed the baby back gently, making sure it was wrapped warmly against the evening air. And when the parents were done apologizing, when the crowd was waiting for his response, for the righteous anger, the bitter reproach, the well-earned "I told you so," Hakuin said, "Is that so?" The same 3 words, spoken with the same tone, carrying neither bitterness for the months of suffering nor triumph at being vindicated. The words did not change because Hakuin's interior did not change. Whether the world accused him or exonerated him, whether they bowed or spat, whether they praised or condemned, he remained exactly where he was, exactly who he was. This is equanimity in its purest form. Not indifference. Hakuin cared deeply for the child, and his care was evident in every action. Not passivity. He actively chose every single day to respond with grace instead of grievance. Equanimity is the refusal to let external circumstances dictate your internal state. It is the discovery that your center holds, regardless of what is swirling around it. Most of the pain you carry from being judged comes from one of 2 places. Either you are waiting for the people who hurt you to acknowledge that they were wrong, or you are trying to build a case strong enough to convince them. Both of these keep you locked in a relationship with their opinion. Both of these hand you
them the key to your peace. Hakuin refused to hand over that key. When accused, he did not scramble to defend. When vindicated, he did not scramble to gloat. Both reactions would have tied his peace to the crowd's verdict. Instead, he stayed anchored in the one thing that never changed, his own direct experience of his own truth. You might be thinking, but I am not a Zen master. I am just a person who was hurt, and it is not that easy. And you are right, it is not easy. Hakuin's equanimity was not a trick or a personality trait. It was the product of decades of practice, of sitting with discomfort, of learning to observe his own reactions without being consumed by them. He was not born with the ability to respond to slander with 3 calm words. He cultivated it, one difficult moment at a time. And that is actually the most encouraging part of the story. Equanimity is not reserved for monks and masters. It is a capacity that lives in every human being. You already have it. You have experienced it in small moments, times when someone said something unkind and you genuinely did not care, not because you were suppressing your feelings, but because the comment simply did not touch anything real inside you. In those moments, you were Hakuin. You were standing in the center of a storm that was all wind and no weight. The practice is to widen those moments, to extend the territory of that inner stillness so that it holds not just in trivial situations, but in difficult ones. Not by forcing calm, but by gradually loosening the grip of the belief that you need the world's approval to be whole. The truth came out for Hakuin. It does not always. Sometimes the lie persists. Sometimes the accusation is never retracted, the apology never comes, the record is never corrected. And here is where Hakuin's teaching goes deeper than most people realize.
His peace was not dependent on the truth coming out. He was at peace during the months of accusation, not because he knew it would eventually be resolved, but because his peace was never conditional on resolution in the first place. If the young woman had never confessed, if Hakun had carried that false reputation to his grave, his response would have been exactly the same. Is that so? Not because the truth did not matter, but because his access to the truth was internal, not external. He did not need the world to confirm what he already knew. And that is the invitation for you tonight, not to become indifferent to what people think, but to stop making their opinion the foundation of your self-worth. To recognize that the people who judge you are answering their own questions, seeing through their own lenses, carrying their own signs. Their verdict, whatever it may be, is a commentary on their world, not on yours. You know who you are. You know what you have carried, what you have endured, what you have tried, and that knowing does not require a single other person to validate it.
Settled, with the external judgments recognized for what they are, and the internal arrows gently laid down, there remains one final teaching, not about how to respond to the world's criticism, but about what to become in the face of it. Not a strategy, but a transformation. The Buddha gave this teaching not to a stranger, not to a crowd, but to his own son. Rahula had been ordained as a young novice monk, and like any young person stepping onto a demanding path, he needed guidance, not abstract philosophy, but practical instruction for how to navigate a world that would not always be kind to him. In the Maha Rahulovada Sutta, the Buddha sat with Rahula and spoke plainly. "Develop a mind that is like the earth," he said. "For on the earth, people throw both pure and impure things. They throw flowers, they throw waste, they throw perfume, and they throw filth, yet the earth is not troubled by any of it. The earth does not recoil from what is unclean. The earth does not cling to what is beautiful. The earth simply receives and remains what it is." He continued, "Develop a mind that is like water. People wash clean things in water and dirty things in water. Blood, soap, dye, sewage, all of it passes through water. And water is not disgusted. Water does not refuse. Water continues to flow. Develop a mind that is like fire. Fire burns both precious sandalwood and common garbage. It does not prefer one over the other. It does not discriminate between what is worthy and what is worthless. Fire simply does what fire does. It burns, and it remains fire. Develop a mind that is like wind. The wind carries the scent of roses and the stench of decay with equal indifference. It does not chase one and flee the other. It moves through everything without being stained by anything. 4 elements, 4 instructions, and beneath all of them, a single principle. Become so vast that nothing thrown at you can alter your nature. This is not what most people expect the Buddha to teach his son. You might expect advice about avoiding difficult people, or techniques for building boundaries, or strategies for winning arguments. But the Buddha did not teach Rahula to defend himself. He did not teach him to fight back or to build walls. He taught him to become something that does not need walls, because nothing can penetrate it. The earth does not need armor. It does not need a shield. It does not need to prepare for what people will throw on it, because nothing that lands on it can change what it is made of. You can dump a truckload of garbage on the earth, and the earth is still the earth. You can scatter flowers across it, and the earth is still the earth. It does not become garbage.
It does not become flowers. It absorbs, it receives, it holds, and it remains. When someone speaks harshly about you, their words land on you the way waste lands on the earth. The words are unpleasant. No one would choose to have them, but they do not change the earth.
Composition of the ground. Your nature, your kindness, your sincerity, your effort, your intention is not altered by their opinion. Their words sit on the surface. They do not reach the bedrock. And when someone praises you, their words land on you the way flowers land on the earth, pleasant, welcomed, but also temporary. The earth does not become proud when it receives flowers. It does not build its identity around being adorned, because it knows, without needing to think about it, that flowers wilt and waste decomposes, and the surface is always changing, but the ground itself does not change. This is the teaching the Buddha wanted his son to carry for the rest of his life. Not a technique for managing emotions, but a fundamental shift in self-understanding. You are not the surface. You are not the things people place on you, the praise, the blame, the love, the contempt. You are the ground beneath all of it, and the ground does not need anyone's permission to be solid. Every judgment you have ever received, every cutting remark, every dismissive glance, every whispered opinion is something that was placed on your surface. It landed there, it sat there, and if you identified with it, if you said, "This is who I am now, this is what they think of me, so this must be what I am," then you mistook the waste for the earth. You confused what was thrown on you with what you are made of. Rahula was young when he heard this teaching. He had a lifetime of praise and blame ahead of him, a lifetime of people who would admire him for being the Buddha's son, and people who would resent him for the same reason. The teaching was preparation. It was his father saying, "The world will throw everything it has at you. Some of it will be kind, much of it will not. And if your peace depends on which type lands on you today, you will never have a single day of rest. But if you become the earth, if you understand that you are the ground, not the garbage, not the flowers, then nothing anyone throws can reach the place where your peace lives." This is where all the teachings of tonight converge. You learned not to accept what is not yours. You learned that patience lives deeper than any wound. You learned that people see what they are looking for. You learned to lay down the second arrow. You learned that what the world calls a curse may be a blessing still ripening. You learned that you do not need the world to confirm what you already know. And now, with Rahula's teaching, you learn the final truth. You are the earth. You have always been the earth. And no amount of judgment, no matter how loud, how persistent, how cruel, can change what you are made of. The voices that have hurt you, surface debris. The opinions that kept you awake, surface debris. The criticism that made you question your worth, surface debris. All of it sits on you. None of it is you. Become the earth. Not by trying, not by forcing, but by recognizing what you have always been. Vast, patient, unshakable, present, able to hold everything without being damaged by anything. The ground beneath your body right now is holding you without effort. It does not strain under your weight. It does not ask whether you deserve to be held. It simply holds. And that is who you are to the world's judgments, the ground that holds them without being moved by them, steady, ancient, and whole.
So let this be the place where the river slows, where the current, after carrying you through 7 stories and 7 teachings, finally widens into something quiet and still. Breathe in. Feel the air enter your body, not as a technique, not as an exercise, but as a reminder that you are here. You made it through another day. You are alive, you are listening, and that is enough. Tonight, you heard the Buddha refuse a Brahmin's feast of anger, and you were reminded that you do not have to accept what does not belong to you. You sat with Kantivadi as his body was taken apart and his heart remained whole, and you learned that the deepest part of you is a room no one else can enter. You watched a painting receive scorn and praise from the same people on the same day, and you recognized that the opinions of others are mirrors of their own world, not measurements of yours. You felt the weight of the second arrow and began, perhaps for the first time, to notice the one you have been shooting at yourself, and you heard the invitation to open your hands and let it go. You walked with Supavasa through 7 years of doubt, and you met Sivali, the being everyone called cursed, who became one of the greatest blessings the world has known. And you understood that your timing is not broken no matter what anyone says. You stood beside Hakuen as the world destroyed his name and watched him respond with nothing more than, "Is that so?" And you glimpsed a freedom that does not require anyone else's permission. And you heard the Buddha tell his own son to become the earth, and you realized that you already are. You are the earth. The words people have thrown at you are on the surface. They are not the bedrock. They are not the core. They are leaves and dust and rain, and the ground holds all of it without losing itself. So tonight, as you lie here, feeling the weight of your body settling into wherever you are resting, let each exhale carry something away, not by force, not by will, just by gravity. The heavy things fall first. The cruel words someone said to you last week, let them fall. The look of disapproval that still stings, let it fall. The voice in your head that keeps asking, am I enough? Let it fall. Not because the answer is no, because the question itself has been placed on your surface by people who do not know what you are made of, and you do not owe them an answer. You have endured enough today. You have carried enough. Whatever judgment reached you, spoken or silent, recent or ancient, it has no authority over this moment. This breath belongs to you alone. This quiet belongs to you alone. And in this quiet, there is nothing to defend, nothing to prove, nothing to become. You are already whole. May you rest tonight, knowing that no voice in this world is loud enough to disturb the peace that lives at the center of who you are. May the words that wounded you find their way back to the ground, where they can do no harm. May you wake tomorrow lighter, not because the world has changed, but because you remembered what you are made of. The earth does not argue with the rain. It simply holds steady and waits for morning. Rest now. You have earned every moment of this silence. Good night.